welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're unpacking the high-stakes reality of workplace health and safety, or WHS, right inside the fast-paced multimedia industry. When we think of multimedia production, film sets, animation studios, editing bays, we usually picture wild creativity and super tight deadlines. But behind the scenes, there's this incredibly complex, heavily legislated environment. And let's be real, this isn't just about filling out boring paperwork. It's about avoiding absolute disaster. It's about protecting human lives and keeping multi-million-dollar productions from just grinding to a complete halt. So, if you want to understand exactly how top-tier studios maintain both world-class safety and peak efficiency, you are definitely in the right place. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. First, the true cost of safety. Then, WHS law and liability. Third, mastering the risk assessment. After that, designing a safer studio. And finally, building a safety culture. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the true cost of safety. To really frame this, I want to pose a question directly to you. It's actually drawn straight from a 2013 HSC exam on this exact topic. Why should a company comply with safety standards? Now, it seems like a pretty simple question, right? But the stakes attached to the answer are just incredibly high. It's not just because it's a nice thing to do. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the massive dual threat that companies face if they fail to comply. Failing to comply presents a dual threat that can literally tank a company. Think about the financial costs first. When an industrial accident happens on a set or in a studio, it immediately causes severe production disruptions. We're talking massive financial losses, paying workers' compensation, scrambling to replace injured staff, and dealing with plummeting morale and productivity. But then, you have to look at the criminal costs. The company is legally responsible for the safety of its employees. Failing in that responsibility doesn't just mean getting hit with a fine. It can mean severe financial penalties and actual real-world criminal prosecution if the company is found at fault for a workplace injury or death. Moving right along to Section 2, WHS law and liability. Now, what's really fascinating about modern Australian legislation is the vocabulary it uses. It doesn't just refer to the boss or employer in these vague, general terms anymore. The law explicitly uses the term PCBU, which stands for Person Conducting a Business or Undertaking. If you're leading a business, the legal responsibility for safety falls squarely on your shoulders. It's a comprehensive catch-all term that ensures accountability cannot simply be passed off or swept under the rug. WHS legislation exists specifically to protect the welfare of employees. It makes staff safety a non-negotiable legal requirement. The law dictates that a PCBU, literally, must provide comprehensive safety training, supply safe equipment, conduct regular safety inspections, and have crystal-clear evacuation procedures. They also have to erect proper safety signage and establish active safety committees. You can't just pick and choose from this list like a menu. This is the absolute baseline required to maintain a safe working environment and avoid those severe criminal penalties we just talked about. All right, Section 3, Mastering the Risk Assessment. So the core purpose of a risk assessment is incredibly straightforward, but deeply, deeply important. It's to identify, eliminate, remove, or minimize hazards for workers. And you do this by measuring both the severity of the potential harm and the likelihood of it actually happening. For example, imagine a multimedia employer doing a risk assessment on printer toner chemicals in a physical asset fabrication space. By identifying this toxicity hazards preemptively, they stop the chemical from causing harm before it ever happens. Controlling these hazards leads directly to fewer injuries, way less sick leave, and ultimately, a much more efficient business. To achieve that level of safety, we use what's called the hierarchy of control. Think of it as building a structured defense against hazards. It's a step-down methodology. You always start at step 1, elimination. Can we just completely remove the hazard? If we can't, we step down to substitution, replacing it with something safer. If that fails, we use engineering controls, like physical barriers. Then comes administrative controls, which are your rules and training. And finally, the absolute last resort is step 5, PPE, or personal protective equipment. PPE doesn't stop the hazard from existing. It's literally just a tiny barrier between the worker and the danger. Let's look at a brilliant real-world multimedia example of this hierarchy in action. Imagine a firm dealing with poor hazard control. They're trying to film a scene at a live, busy street intersection. The risk of a moving vehicle impacting a crew member is just huge. Now picture applying the hierarchy. Using the ultimate control, elimination, the firm films the exact same scene on a closed set with a replica intersection. Boom, total control over the environment. But if they absolutely must film on location, they step down the hierarchy. They use engineering and administrative controls like barricades, professional traffic controllers, police officers, and they strictly restrict filming to non-peak hours.
That brings us to Section 4, Designing a Safer Studio.
Multimedia workplaces are heavily, and I mean heavily, dependent on high-density electrical infrastructure. We're talking high-draw rendering servers, massive studio lighting rigs, and dual-monitor workstations everywhere. So the strategy here is enforcing a comprehensive electrical compliance program, specifically routine test and tagging by a qualified technician following the AS/NZS 360 standard. This proactive strategy identifies faulty grounding or damaged internal insulation well before a failure occurs. It explicitly eliminates the nightmare hazard of catastrophic electrical fires or workers getting nasty shocks.
Next up is physical infrastructure on an active set. You might actually be surprised to learn that slips, trips, and falls are among the most common physical injuries on any media production set. By utilizing structural cable management, like implementing overhead cable trays, desk grommets, and heavy-duty rubber floor ramps, you are physically isolating all those trailing camera, audio, and lighting leads right out of pedestrian walkways. And doing that drastically reduces the statistical frequency of these accidents.
But look, safety isn't just about dodging moving cars or avoiding electrocution. It's heavily about human factors and ergonomics too. Multimedia developers, animators, and editors spend prolonged periods completely stationary at their digital workstations. This brings a really high risk of repetitive strain injury, or RSI, which is an injury resulting from excessive, prolonged computer use or just constant biomechanical stress on the body.
To combat RSI, we have to optimize the workstation itself. We're talking about supplying workers with fully adjustable task chairs with proper lumbar support, sit-to-stand desks, and articulating monitor arms that place the screen exactly at eye level. The direct safety improvement here is that it guarantees neutral body postures. By actively minimizing that biomechanical stress on the lumbar and cervical spine, the PCBU is preventing long-term debilitating chronic conditions like RSI and carpal tunnel syndrome. Visual health is just as critical. This means combining administrative and engineering controls by installing ambient, diffused lighting to minimize screen glare, using hardware blue light filters, and enforcing software-driven prompts that mandate screen breaks, like the famous 20-20-20 rule. And the safety improvement? This powerful combination severely mitigates optic muscle fatigue and dry eye syndrome. It ensures cognitive comfort and, most importantly, protects the long-term visual health of the entire editing team.
And finally, Section 5, Building a Safety Culture.
Truly improving safety requires building a proactive workplace culture where communication flows transparently right between management and staff. And the best way to do this? Establishing a dedicated, incredibly diverse WHS committee. You don't just want a bunch of executives on this committee. You want audio engineers, post-production editors, and floor managers. You absolutely need people from various departments who understand the unique, everyday hazards of their specific workspaces to be holding these monthly risk assessment reviews.
So the crucial takeaway is that consulting with workers directly leverages their daily operational insight. It transforms a workplace from being rigidly compliant just on paper into a living, breathing safety culture. By communicating transparently, a committee can catch near misses, things like a server rack starting to overheat or a loose step on the studio stairs, and mitigate them before an actual injury ever occurs. This fosters a shared culture of safety ownership across the entire company. A huge part of that transparent communication involves clear visual cues. Erecting prominent, internationally recognized graphical signage across the facility is incredibly effective. For example, using green signs for first aid locations, yellow caution signs for high-voltage server rooms, and blue mandatory PPE icons in physical asset fabrication spaces. Using visual standardized signs instantly communicates hazards and safe practices. It completely bypasses complex written policies and absolutely any potential literacy or language barriers, ensuring immediate hazard comprehension for all staff and visiting clients. This is the ultimate difference between an unprepared workplace and a prepared one. Picture an unprepared workplace. It's pure chaos during an emergency. There's no transparent hazard tracking, and staff literally don't know what to do when things go wrong. Now contrast that with a prepared workplace. They maintain a transparent accident log to constantly review incidents. And they have designated, trained first aid officers and fire wardens. A structured system ensures that if an incident actually does occur, the severity of the injury is minimized through a swift, highly competent medical response. So, we've covered the heavy legal liabilities, the hierarchy of control, practical studio design, and proactive consultation. But I really want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on today.
Safety isn't just some compliance checklist you reluctantly tick off once a year. It is a daily culture. Look at the practices in your own workspace right now and ask yourself, is your multimedia studio truly safe, or have you just been lucky so far? It is time to take structured ownership of your WHS culture. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, stay safe out there.